This poor 4-year-old girl steals bread from a millionaire. He gets furious and decides to do something cruel to her. But when he looks into the little girl's face, he discovers something unexpected. Comment on what you think is going to happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The biting wind of July whipped through the streets of Chicago like invisible razors, making Lily clutch the threadbare coat she'd gotten, as a hand-me-down even tighter around herself. At 6 years old, she already knew the streets of downtown like the back of her hand, every alley, every store, every place where she could find shelter when hunger or the cold got too much to bear. Her curly, always disheveled hair blew around her face as she walked aimlessly, trying to ignore the rumbling of her stomach, which hadn't seen real food in almost 3 days. The little girl watched through the shop windows as well-dressed people did their shopping, sat in fancy cafes, living a reality that seemed as distant to her as the stars she saw from the window of the shack where she lived. Her hazel eyes, inherited from her mother, Jasmine, scanned every detail of that world that didn't belong to her. Jasmine, at 28, worked as a cleaning lady in houses so far away that she often had to sleep there to save on bus fare. "It's just for a little while, honey," she always said, kissing Lily's forehead before leaving for another few days. But that little while seemed to stretch on indefinitely, and the refrigerator remained as empty as the promises of a better life. On that particularly difficult morning, the only food Lily had managed to find were some almost rotten apples that a fruit vendor, his heart heavy at the sight of the skinny little girl, had set aside for her. But now, late in the afternoon, her stomach was protesting again, and the smell coming from the upscale bakery in the ritzy neighborhood was an impossible torture to ignore. Aroma Breads was known for its artisanal breads and its exclusive clientele. Through the huge glass windows, Lily could see elegant people sipping their coffees in delicate cups, while trays and trays of golden loaves passed between the tables. The aroma that escaped through the door every time someone entered or left was a temptation greater than her willpower. That's when she saw him. Theodore Teddy Mendelsohn, the most talked-about businessman in the city, was sitting at one of the tables near the window, gesturing animatedly as he talked to other men in suits. His expression was stern, and his voice, even muffled by the glass, sounded commanding. Lily had seen him a few times in the newspaper she used to cover herself on the coldest nights. Hunger was a constant companion to Lily, but on that specific day, it seemed to have claws that tore at her stomach. Without thinking twice, the girl waited for the moment when the clerk was distracted by another customer and slipped silently into the bakery, her eyes fixed on a golden, still-steaming French roll that was at the edge of the counter. With her heart beating so hard it felt like it wanted to jump out of her chest, Lily reached out her trembling hand and in a quick movement slipped the roll into the torn pocket of her coat. The warmth of the food against her body was both comforting and terrifying. She took 2 steps towards the exit, already tasting victory, when a shrill voice cut through the air. "Stop, thief! The girl is stealing!" The employee's shout made everyone's gaze turn to Lily. Time seemed to freeze. The murmur of conversation ceased instantly, and the only sound that could be heard was the clinking of cups on the tables and the girl's heart, which now sounded like a runaway drum. Theodore Mendelsohn rose abruptly from his chair, knocking his cup of coffee over important documents. His eyes flashed with anger at the interruption of his meeting. With heavy steps, he crossed the room towards the girl, who was now trembling like a leaf in the wind. "What the hell is going on here?" His voice boomed through the room. The other customers watched the scene in deathly silence, some with expressions of disgust, others with poorly disguised pity. Before Lily could move, Theodore grabbed her arm tightly, causing her to let out a moan of pain. The bread fell from her pocket and rolled across the impeccably clean floor of the bakery. "Look at me, you little brat," he ordered, forcing the girl's face up. I'm going to make sure I take you to the police myself. It's time someone dealt with these kids who are roaming around, stealing from decent people. But when Lily's eyes met his, something extraordinary happened. Theodore felt like he had been punched in the stomach. That look, it was exactly the same look that his late wife Marilyn used to have, determined, but at the same time, so vulnerable. For a moment, he went back 15 years in time, seeing his deceased wife in her last days, with that same expression of someone carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, but still not giving up. The businessman felt his legs weaken. His hand, which seconds before had been gripping the girl's arm tightly, loosened its grip. The silence in the bakery was deafening, everyone present waiting to see what the outcome of that scene would be. Time seemed to have frozen inside aroma breads. Theodore remained there, paralyzed, his hand now trembling slightly as he held Lily's arm. The men from his meeting whispered among themselves, visibly uncomfortable with that interruption that had already lasted too long. The employee who had shouted moments before began to approach with a telephone in her hands, probably to call the police, but Theodore stopped her with an abrupt gesture. "How much does the bread cost?" he asked, his voice sounding strangely hoarse. The employee blinked, confused. It's $7, Mr. Mendelssohn. Set aside a dozen, and also put those pastries in the display case, the croissants, and a quart of milk." Theodore released Lily's arm and turned to the businessmen who were waiting for him. "Gentlemen, I apologize, but we'll need to reschedule. My assistant will contact you later today." The men exchanged glances, clearly upset, but no one dared to question Theodore Mendelssohn. One by one, they left the bakery, leaving behind their half-finished cups of coffee and the unsigned contracts on the table. Lily remained motionless, her big, hazel eyes alternating between Theodore and the door, as if calculating her chances of escape. But there was something in that man now, a softness that wasn't there moments before, an old sadness that seemed to have emerged from the depths of his soul. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to be at the girl's height. "Lily," she replied, so softly that it could barely be heard. "And where's your mother, Lily?" The girl hesitated. Jasmine had always warned her about not talking to strangers, especially about where they lived, but something in that man's eyes made her answer. "She's working. She's gone 3-4 days sometimes. She's a cleaning lady." Theodore felt his heart clench. How many times had that child gone hungry alone? While he was wasting fortunes trying to keep up appearances, there was a girl who just wanted a piece of bread. "Come," he said, taking the bags that the employee had already prepared. "Let's talk a little." They sat at a table in the back of the bakery, away from the curious glances of the other customers. Theodore watched in silence as Lily devoured a croissant, trying to control herself so as not to eat too quickly, but failing in her attempt to seem polite. "Where do you live, Lily?" Between bites, she replied, "In the South Side, in a small shack, me and Mom. We share a twin bed." Theodore knew that neighborhood well. It was one of the poorest areas of Chicago, a cluster of precarious dwellings that he usually saw only through the window of his imported car. Or rather, the car he pretended to own, since he had only been paying the interest on the loan for months. "And your father?" Lily shrugged, a surprisingly adult gesture for a 6-year-old. "Never met him. Mom says he left before I was born." At that moment, Walter, his butler, entered the bakery hastily. Theodore had texted him minutes before. "Mr. Mendelssohn," said Walter, his voice dripping with disapproval at seeing the ragged child sitting at the table with his boss. "The investors called. They are very unhappy with the cancellation of the meeting. You know we need that contract." "Not now, Walter," Theodore interrupted, although he knew that his butler was right. That meeting was crucial. The creditors were closing in, and without new investments, his facade of a successful man would crumble in a matter of weeks. His thoughts were interrupted by a coughing fit from Lily. The cold day and poor diet were clearly affecting her health. "Walter, I want you to find out where this girl's mother lives. Her name is Jasmine. She works as a cleaning lady. I need to talk to her." The butler frowned. "Sir, with all due respect, you have important commitments today. Mrs. Livingston has... He called 3 times this morning, and I said, 'Now, Walter,'" Theodore's voice thundered, causing Lily to shrink back instinctively. When they were alone again, Theodore noticed the dirt stains on the girl's face, the worn clothes, the shoes, with holes. How could someone so small carry so much suffering? "Do you go to school, Lily?" She shook her head. "Mom tried to enroll me in the neighborhood school, but they said there were no vacancies, and she doesn't have money to buy a uniform and supplies." Theodore felt something break inside him. There he was, spending fortunes on forged works of art to keep up appearances, while a child couldn't even go to school. The image of Marilyn came to his mind again. She who had always dreamed of having children, who loved children, who had left too early because of a disease that he, even with all his money, had not been able to cure. His hands began to tremble slightly, one of the first signs of the degenerative disease that he tried so hard to hide. Discreetly, he took a bottle of medicine from his pocket and took 2 pills at once. 2 hours later, Walter returned with the information about Jasmine. She was working in a house in the outer neighborhood of the city, where she usually spent 3 or 4 days in a row. "Take me there," ordered Theodore, getting up. Then, turning to Lily, "You're coming with me. Let's find your mother." On the way, as he watched the girl asleep in the back seat of his car, Theodore struggled against contradictory thoughts. Part of him knew that he was acting impulsively, that he was not in a position to help anyone when his own life was falling apart. The other part, however, felt that that meeting was no coincidence. It was as if Marilyn had sent that girl in his path. What Theodore did not know was that that impulsive decision would trigger a series of events that would forever change not only his life, but also the lives of everyone around him. As the car cut through the streets of Chicago towards its destination, the businessman did not notice that his butler was watching him in the rearview mirror with a look full of resentment and suspicion. When they finally arrived at the house where Jasmine worked, an imposing building in the wealthiest neighborhood of the city, Theodore felt his heart race. How would he explain to Lily's mother that a man she didn't know was with her daughter? How would he justify his intentions without seeming crazy or worse, someone with ulterior motives? But before he could organize his thoughts, the door of the house opened, and a young woman with the same hazel eyes as Lily appeared, wearing a work uniform. Her face paled at the sight of her daughter getting out of an imported car with one of the richest men in the city. "Lily!" Her voice came out, trembling. "What's going on here?" Jasmine ran towards her daughter, her trembling hands grabbing Lily's small shoulders as she examined every inch of the familiar little face for signs of injury. Her eyes, identical to the girl's, flashed with a mixture of fear and fury as she stared at Theodore. "What do you want with my daughter?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of all the horror stories she had heard about missing children. Jasmine's employer, Mrs. Eleanor, a lady in her 60s, appeared at the door, curious about the commotion. Her eyes widened as she recognized Theodore Mendelsohn. "Theodore, what are you doing here?" "Eleanor?" Theodore did not expect to find there one of his late wife's old friends. "What a coincidence. Is this your employee?" "Yes, Jasmine has been working for me for a few months." "She is a very dedicated young woman," replied Eleanor, confused by the situation. "But what's going on?" Before Theodore could answer, Walter, who was watching everything with a calculating glint in his eyes, interfered. "Her daughter was caught stealing bread from Aroma Breads, ma'am." Jasmine felt her legs weaken. All the accumulated fatigue of sleepless nights on mats, on the floors of the houses where she worked, all the exhaustion of trying to survive with the little she earned, all the weight of being a single mother in a society that judged her at every turn. All of that seemed to collapse on her shoulders at that moment. "Lily," she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Why did you do that?" The girl, still clinging to the bag of bread that Theodore had bought, replied with the cruel honesty of children. "I was hungry, Mum. It's been 3 days since we've had decent food at home." Jasmine's face flushed with shame. She had left some packages of crackers and fruit for her daughter, but it clearly hadn't been enough. The neighbor, who was supposed to be watching Lily, had probably gotten distracted again, letting the girl wander alone through the city. "Mrs. Jasmine," Theodore took a step forward, his voice softer than anyone there had ever heard. "Can we talk in private?" Eleanor, realizing the delicacy of the situation, offered her living room. While Lily stayed in the kitchen with her employer, Jasmine followed Theodore to the elegantly decorated room, her hands still trembling slightly. "First, I want you to know that your daughter is not in trouble," began Theodore, sitting in a velvet armchair. "In fact, I came here to make a proposal." Jasmine remained standing, suspicious. "What kind of proposal could a man like you have for someone like me?" The question hit Theodore like a slap. "Someone like you," he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "And what kind of person do you think you are?" "A cleaning lady, a single mother, a resident of the South Side," she replied, lifting her chin with a wounded but still present pride. "And you are Theodore Mendelssohn, the millionaire businessman who appears in the newspapers." A bitter smile crossed Theodore's lips. If she only knew that that empire was about to crumble, that the mansion that everyone envied was practically empty, that the expensive paintings on its walls were all fakes. "Mrs. Jasmine, I'm in need of a housekeeper," he said, getting straight to the point. "Someone who can manage my house and—" He hesitated for a moment, his hands starting to tremble slightly. Quickly he hid them in the pockets of his blazer. "And take care of some personal matters for me. I offer a salary 3 times higher than what you earn as a cleaning lady, plus housing for you and your daughter." Jasmine's eyes widened, but soon narrowed in suspicion. "And why me? You don't even know me." "Because your daughter reminded me of someone very important that I lost," he replied, his voice faltering slightly. "And because you, clearly, are a woman who would do anything to give your daughter a better life. That's the kind of dedication I'm looking for." "And what's the catch?" asked Jasmine, years of hardship having taught her that nothing in life comes without a price. "Lily will need to attend school, not just any school, the Crestwood Academy, where I am one of the benefactors." Jasmine let out an incredulous laugh. "Crestwood Academy, that school is for the children of millionaires. Lily would never be accepted there." "She will be," stated Theodore with a certainty that he didn't feel in anything else in his life. "I guarantee it." At that moment, Walter entered the room without knocking, carrying a tray with coffee. His hands trembled slightly, spilling a few drops on the silver tray. Theodore watched him with irritation, since the butler had lost crucial documents that could have avoided disastrous investments. His competence had been declining visibly. "Excuse me," said Walter, his voice loaded with a poorly disguised disdain when looking at Jasmine. "Mr. Mendelssohn, Mrs. Livingston called again. She said it's urgent." Theodore made an impatient gesture with his hand, dismissing the butler. But before Walter left, Jasmine noticed something strange. He had left the coffee tray deliberately close to a folder of important documents, and the liquid was beginning to spread dangerously towards the papers. "Watch out!" she exclaimed, quickly moving the folder. "The documents were going to get wet." Walter gave her a glacial look before retiring, but Theodore had noticed something in his gesture, an agility and attention to detail that didn't match someone who just cleaned houses. "Do you have experience with documents?" he asked, curious. Jasmine hesitated before answering. "I have a degree in accounting, but I never got a job in the area. You know how it is. prejudice. That information hit Theodore like lightning. An accountant. That was exactly what he needed. Someone who could help him organize the mess that his accounting books had become. Someone who could identify where exactly his former partner, Gus, had started diverting money from the company. "Mrs. Jasmine," he said, leaning forward, "I think I can offer you something better than the position of housekeeper. But first, I need you to sign a confidentiality agreement." Outside the room, Walter pressed his ear against the door, his face contorted in an expression of hatred. In his 20 years of service to the Mendelssohn family, he had accumulated enough secrets to destroy Theodore, and now that meddling cleaning lady threatened to ruin his plans for revenge. In the kitchen, Lily watched Eleanor prepare hot chocolate, her attentive little eyes capturing every detail of the luxurious environment. In her childish head, the hope of a different life was beginning to form. A life where her mother wouldn't have to sleep in strangers' houses, where she could have her own toys, where the closet would never be empty. What no one there knew was that at that very moment, Gladys, Theodore's aunt, was in her law office, preparing the documents necessary to challenge her nephew's sanity. The news that he had taken a street child to his bakery had already reached her ears, and that was the opportunity she had been waiting for years to take control of the family's business. Theodore rummaged in his briefcase, his hands trembling. More than usual, he had forgotten to take his medication at the right time. While looking for the confidentiality documents, an envelope fell to the floor, scattering some old photos. In one of them, his deceased wife Marilyn smiled at the camera, her eyes determined but vulnerable, exactly like Lily's. The Mendelssohn mansion cast an imposing shadow over the manicured garden when Theodore's car crossed the iron gates. For Lily, who firmly held her mother's hand, the place seemed to have come out of a fairy tale. For Jasmine, however, every detail screamed danger. It was too grand, too perfect to be true. Walter opened the front door with a forced bow, his cold eyes following every movement of the new inhabitants. The interior of the mansion, which should be full of luxury, surprised Jasmine. There were few furnishings, arranged strategically to give the impression of occupation. The walls, although decorated with apparently expensive paintings, had a poorly disguised air of abandonment. "I'll show you your quarters," said Theodore, guiding them up the stairs. His hands were visibly trembling now, and he had to pause, halfway up, leaning on the railing. "Are you all right?" asked Jasmine, noticing the beads of sweat on his forehead. "Perfectly," he replied dryly, although his face was pale. "Walter, bring my medication." The butler nodded with a sinister smile and disappeared through the hallways. Jasmine couldn't help but notice how he seemed to intimately know every corner of the house, every shadow, every secret. The room designated to them was spacious and airy, with 2 beds, a luxury that Jasmine and Lily had never experienced. The girl immediately ran to the window, her eyes shining when she saw the pool in the backyard. "Can we swim?" she asked. "Hopefully." "Of course," replied Theodore, a genuine smile softening his hard features. "But first, we have to sort out your enrollment in school." At that moment, Walter returned with a glass of water and a bottle of medicine. Theodore swallowed 2 pills hastily, his hands still trembling. "Mrs. Jasmine," he said, regaining his composure, "I would like you to start examining some documents today. There are irregularities that need to be investigated." "What kind of irregularities?" she asked, her professional instinct sharpened after years of studying accounting. Before Theodore could answer, a strident voice echoed through the hallway. "Theodore Mendelssohn, what's this story I'm hearing?" Gladys, Theodore's aunt, advanced down the hallway like a tornado in an expensive silk dress. At 78 years old, she still maintained the authoritarian posture that had made her famous in Chicago's social circles. "Aunt Gladys!" Theodore sighed, running his hand over his tired face. "I wasn't expecting your visit today." "Obviously not," she replied with disdain, her eyes scanning Jasmine and Lily as if they were unwanted insects. "We need to talk, in private." Theodore nodded resignedly and followed his aunt to his office, leaving Jasmine and Lily with Walter, who began to explain the rules of the house with an almost sadistic pleasure in each prohibition he listed. In the office, Gladys didn't waste time. "Have you completely lost your mind? Bringing these people into our house? What would Marilyn think of this?" "Don't you dare use her name," Theodore growled, his voice trembling with contained anger. "You never cared about Marilyn when she was alive. And you've been destroying yourself since she left," retorted Gladys. "The investors are talking, Theodore. They comment on your tremors, your erratic decisions, and now this, bringing a cleaning lady and her daughter to live here." "Jasmine is an accountant," defended Theodore. "She's going to help me find evidence." "Against Gus." Gladys laughed, a humorless sound. "That subject again. Isn't it time to accept that you made mistakes in the investments? That it was your fault?" What neither of them realized was that Walter was outside, listening to every word. Through the poorly closed door, a malicious smile formed on his lips as he took his cell phone out of his pocket and quickly typed a message. Meanwhile, in the room, Jasmine helped Lily put her few clothes in the immense mahogany closet. The girl hummed softly, happy with the change, but her mother couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with that situation. "Mom!" called Lily suddenly, her voice serious. "Walter doesn't like us, does he?" Jasmine hugged her daughter, surprised by her perception. "Why do you think that, honey?" "The way he looks. It seems like he wants to hurt us." Before Jasmine could answer, they heard the sound of glass breaking coming from the office, followed by loud shouts. She hesitated for a moment, but her instinct made her run to see what had happened. Upon reaching the office door, she found Theodore lying on the floor, convulsing violently. Gladys screamed for help, while Walter watched the scene with a strangely satisfied expression. "Call an ambulance," ordered Jasmine, running to help Theodore. Her years working in different houses had taught her basic first aid procedures. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics asked several questions about Theodore's medication. It was then that Jasmine noticed something strange. The pills that Walter had brought had a slightly different color from those in the original bottle that she found on the office desk. At the hospital, while Theodore was being treated, Jasmine took the opportunity to take a look at his briefcase, which she had brought with her in a hurry. Among the papers, she found financial reports that showed an alarming situation. The Mendelssohn fortune was practically decimated, with growing debts and failed investments. But there was something more intriguing. Some signatures on important contracts seemed different from the originals, as if they had been forged. And they all dated back to the time when Gus, the former partner, was still part of the company. In the hospital room, Theodore finally regained consciousness. His first thought was of panic. Had anyone noticed his tremors? Had his degenerative disease been discovered? "The doctors said it was an adverse reaction to the medication," informed Jasmine, sitting next to his bed, "as if the medicines were stronger than normal." Theodore closed his eyes, understanding the implication of those words. "Walter," he murmured. "He was the one who brought the medicine." "Mr. Mendelssohn," said Jasmine hesitantly, "I found something in your documents." "About Gus." She showed him the divergent signatures, explaining how her experience in accounting allowed her to recognize signs of document fraud. Theodore felt his heart race. Finally, concrete proof that he hadn't gone crazy, that his suspicions about his former partner were well-founded. But before they could deepen the conversation, Gladys burst into the hospital room, accompanied by a man in a suit who introduced himself as Dr. Richards, a specialist in family law. "Theodore!" she said with false sweetness. "Considering your current condition, we thought it best to discuss the possibility of a temporary guardianship of your assets." The world seemed to spin around Theodore. That was it. His nightmare was coming true. His aunt would finally do what she had always wanted, take control of everything. At that moment, Lily, who was quietly in a corner of the room playing with an old doll, got up and walked to Theodore's bed. Without saying anything, she took his trembling hand between her small hands. The simple gesture of the girl brought tears to the businessman's eyes. In a few days, that child who had tried to steal a bread in his bakery had become a beacon of light in his dark life. What no one there knew was that, at that very moment, Walter was in his small apartment in the back of the mansion, typing frantically on his computer. On the screen, an email addressed to Gus revealed the plan he had been plotting for years. A plan that could not only destroy Theodore, but also crush the hopes of Jasmine and Lily for a better life. The return to the mansion after the hospitalization was marked by a heavy silence. Theodore, still debilitated, watched the landscape through the car window while his mind swirled with worries. Beside him, Lily slept peacefully, her head resting on Jasmine's lap, who discreetly analyzed a folder of documents. Upon arriving, they found Walter at the entrance, his servile posture not completely hiding a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. "It's good that you're back," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Mrs. Livingston left specific instructions about your medications." "It won't be necessary," cut Jasmine, surprising everyone with her firmness. "I myself will take care of Mr. Mendelssohn's medicines from now on." Walter's face contorted in an expression of displeasure, but he said nothing. Theodore realized for the first time how his butler seemed different. There was an aura of barely contained threat in his gestures, a hostility that he had never noticed before. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Jasmine met with Theodore in the office. The full moon cast restless shadows through the tall windows, dancing on the paintings on the walls, works that she now knew to be expensive forgeries. "I found something in the documents," she began, spreading papers on the mahogany table. "There are records of bank transfers made by Gus. He created a complex network of shell companies to divert the money, but he made a basic accounting mistake. Here." She pointed to a series of numbers. "See how the values don't match up? It's as if—" A noise from the hallway interrupted her. Hurried footsteps moved away from the office door. "Walter," murmured Theodore, his hands beginning to tremble slightly. "He's spying on us." "There's more," continued Jasmine, lowering her voice even further. "I found records of emails between Walter and Gus dating back to the time when the important documents disappeared. They weren't lost. They were stolen." Theodore felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Walter, his trusted butler for 20 years, had conspired against him. "Why?" he whispered, more to himself than to Jasmine. "Because of this." She slid another document across the table. It was an old photo, yellowed with time. In it, a much younger Walter was standing next to a beautiful woman who looked extraordinarily like Marilyn. Theodore's voice failed. "My wife." "I found an old diary of Walter's hidden among the mansion's bills. He and your wife were more than employer and employee. They were childhood friends. When she married you, he never forgave the fact that she had chosen a nouveau riche, as he wrote." Theodore's world seemed to spin. So many years, so many lies. "And Gus, Walter provided him with privileged information about your business, helped forge documents, created the perfect situation for you to be manipulated into making disastrous investments. Marilyn's illness was just the catalyst. You were emotionally vulnerable, and they took advantage of that." A sharp scream cut through the night, making them both jump from their chairs. "Lily!" exclaimed Jasmine, running towards her daughter's room. They found the girl sitting on the bed, trembling. "The bad man was here," she sobbed. "He was messing with my things." The room had been ransacked. Drawers open, clothes scattered, and on Lily's bed, an old photo of Marilyn was torn in half. "That was a warning," said Theodore, his voice trembling with anger. "Walter wants us to know that he can get to us whenever he wants." That same night, while the mansion finally fell silent, Gladys received an unexpected visit at her home. Gus, Theodore's former partner, was standing in her living room, a calculating smile on his clean-shaven face. "So," he said, helping himself to an expensive scotch from Gladys's bar, "I heard your nephew brought an accountant to the mansion." "A cleaning lady that he turned into an accountant," corrected Gladys with disdain. "The woman doesn't even have experience." "On the contrary," Gus's voice had a worried tone, "my contacts have informed me that she is extremely competent. If she finds out what really happened to the money—" "Don't be a fool," cut Gladys. "In 3 days, I will present the medical reports to the judge, proving that Theodore is mentally incapable. The guardianship will be mine, and those Southside people will be back in their place." What they didn't know was that Lily, who had come down to drink water, was listening to everything hidden behind the kitchen door. Her 6-year-old mind didn't understand all the words, but she perfectly understood the tone of malice in those voices. The next morning, during breakfast, Theodore watched Lily playing in the garden through the breakfast nook window. The girl had insisted on wearing a blue dress, Marilyn's favorite color, although she didn't know that. "Mr. Mendelssohn," called Jasmine, interrupting his thoughts. "I think I've discovered something important about the paintings." She explained that, when examining the purchase receipts for the works of art, she found a suspicious pattern. All had been purchased through a small gallery which, after investigation, turned out to belong to Gus's cousin. "They not only stole your money," she concluded, "but they also made sure that you invested what was left in fake art to completely destroy your credibility in the market." Theodore felt his hands tremble violently, knocking over his coffee cup. But this time it wasn't his illness, it was pure rage. "We need to act fast," said Jasmine, cleaning up the spilled coffee. "In 3 days your aunt is going to the judge to ask for your guardianship. If she succeeds, we will lose access to all the documents that prove the fraud." "But how?" Theodore's voice was loaded with despair. "I have no one else to trust, no lawyer who isn't bought by them, no—" His speech was interrupted by a scream coming from the garden. Lily was lying near the pool, and Walter was standing next to her, claiming that the girl had tripped on her own. The panic in Lily's eyes told another story. That night, as the storm lashed Chicago, 4 secret meetings were happening simultaneously in the city. At the Mendelssohn mansion, Theodore and Jasmine were planning their next steps. In the apartment, out back, Walter was typing frantically on his computer, preparing his final gambit. At Gladys's house, she and Gus were refining the details of their plan to take control of the business. And in her room, a little 6-year-old girl was doing something that would change everyone's destiny. She was drawing. Lily's drawing showed something that she had accidentally seen days ago: Walter hiding important papers inside a fake book in the mansion's library, papers that could prove everything. The silent war that was unfolding in that mansion was about to reach its climax, and the fate of all would be decided by the most unlikely hands. Those of a child who, weeks ago, only wanted a piece of bread to satisfy her hunger. The morning before the guardianship, hearing dawned grey in Chicago. Theodore watched the fine rain through the window of his office, his hands trembling more than usual as he held a cup of untouched coffee. In less than 24 hours, Gladys would present the medical reports to the judge that supposedly proved his mental incapacity. "Uncle Teddy," Lily's voice pulled him from his dark thoughts. The girl was standing in the doorway of the office, clutching a drawing pad to her chest. "What is it, sweetie?" he asked, trying to smile despite the worry that consumed him. "I need to show you something important," she said, approaching with that peculiar seriousness that she sometimes demonstrated. "I saw Walter doing something wrong." Theodore's heart raced as Lily opened her pad and showed him a drawing made with crayons. Apparently childish at first glance, the drawing showed with surprising precision the mansion's library, and in it, a figure that clearly represented Walter was placing papers inside a fake book on the third shelf. "When did you see this, Lily?" "That day that he pushed me near the pool," she replied, her hazel eyes fixed on Theodore's. "I didn't fall on my own. He got mad because I saw him hiding the papers." At that moment, Jasmine entered the office hastily, carrying a stack of documents. "Mr. Mendelssohn, I discovered something." She stopped when she saw her daughter showing the drawing. "Lily, what's going on?" Quickly they explained the girl's discovery. Jasmine's face paled. "That explains everything. The original documents that prove Gus's fraud weren't lost. They're hidden right here, in the library." "But why would Walter keep them?" questioned Theodore. "Why not destroy them?" "Collateral," replied Jasmine, her years of experience in accounting sharpening her intuition. "He needed something to ensure that Gus wouldn't betray him later." A noise coming from the hallway alerted them. Through the crack in the door, they saw Walter talking on the phone in a low voice. "Yes, Mrs. Livingston. Everything is prepared. For tomorrow, the doctor confirmed that he will testify about Mr. Mendelssohn's mental condition." Theodore felt his blood boil. After 20 years of service, Walter had not only betrayed him, but was also actively participating in his destruction. "We need to act now," whispered Jasmine. "This may be our only chance before the hearing." "But how?" asked Theodore. "Walter never leaves the mansion and the library." "Leave it to me," interrupted Lily, her eyes shining with that determined innocence that so reminded him of Marilyn. "I know what to do." Before they could stop her, the girl ran out of the office and went straight to Walter, who had just hung up the phone. "Uncle Walter," she called, her voice sweet as honey. "Can you help me get a storybook in the library, the one on the highest shelf?" The butler hesitated, his eyes narrowed with suspicion, but denying help to the girl could seem suspicious, especially with Theodore and Jasmine nearby. "All right," he replied dryly, following Lily to the library. While Walter climbed the ladder to reach a children's book, Lily accidentally knocked over a pot of plants. The sound of breaking ceramic made the butler lose his balance. "You little brat!" he shouted, hurrying down to clean up the mess. "Go! Get cleaning supplies from the laundry room now." It was exactly what they needed. As soon as Lily left, Jasmine and Theodore silently entered the library. Following the directions of the drawing, they found the fake book, an old edition of The Count of Monte Cristo, ironically a story about revenge and redemption. Inside it were all the original documents, contracts with authentic signatures, proof of bank transfers, printed emails exchanged between Gus and Walter, and even handwritten letters from Marilyn that revealed that she had discovered something about the diversions shortly before her illness worsened. "Freeze!" Walter's voice thundered through the library. He was standing in the doorway holding Lily by the arm tightly. "Drop those papers now, or the girl—" "Or the girl what, Walter?" The voice of Eleanor, Jasmine's former employer, surprised everyone. She was standing in the hallway, accompanied by 2 police officers and a social worker. "Mrs. Eleanor?" Walter released Lily, who ran to her mother's arms. "What does this mean?" "It means your lies are over," she replied, entering the library. "When Jasmine contacted me last night telling me your suspicions, we decided to prepare a little surprise." The police officers approached Walter, who seemed to have aged 10 years in a few seconds. "You don't understand," he said, his voice trembling. "I loved Marilyn since childhood. She deserved better than a nouveau riche who only cared about money and status. When she got sick, you and Gus saw the perfect opportunity." completed Theodore, his voice loaded with pain and anger. I was vulnerable, plunged into depression. It was easy to manipulate me, wasn't it? At that moment, Gladys burst into the library, followed by Gus. Both stopped when they saw the scene that was unfolding. "What's going on here?" demanded Gladys, but her voice failed when she saw the documents in Theodore's hands. "It's over, Aunt," he said, his voice firmer than it had ever been in recent years. "We found the evidence, all of it." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Statements were taken, documents were seized, and the truth that had been buried for years finally came to light. Gus, seeing himself cornered, ended up confessing the money-laundering scheme. Gladys, trying to save her own skin, revealed her role in the conspiracy. Walter was taken away by the police, but before leaving he turned to Theodore. "She never loved you like she loved me. We were soulmates since children." "You're wrong," replied Theodore, holding up the last item found in the fake book, a never-delivered letter from Marilyn. "She discovered your betrayals, the letter you hid. She was about to denounce you and Gus when she got sick." 3 months passed. The Mendelssohn mansion, once dark and empty, now overflowed with life. Theodore, although still struggling against his degenerative disease, had found a new purpose. With the help of Jasmine, he transformed the scandal into opportunity. He sold the mansion and the fake paintings, paid off his debts, and invested what was left in something improbable: a bakery. Aroma Breads, where it had all begun, was now his, but it was no longer an exclusive establishment. It became a welcoming place, which offered bread and hope at affordable prices. Jasmine, with her talent for numbers, managed the finances with precision and honesty. Lily, enrolled at Crestwood Academy, surprised everyone with her exemplary grades and her ability to make friends. Her drawing, the one that had unraveled the whole mystery, was framed on the wall of the bakery, a constant reminder that the truth can come from the most unexpected sources. On a Sunday afternoon, while the bakery was bustling with customers, Theodore watched Lily helping serve bread to customers, wearing a small apron with her name embroidered on it. Jasmine, at his side, smiled when she saw her daughter so happy. "You know," he said, his hands trembling slightly as he held a cup of coffee, "for years I thought my life was over when Marilyn left, that nothing else made sense besides money and appearances. And now?" asked Jasmine, helping him steady the cup. "Now I understand that sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters," he replied, watching Lily hug an elderly customer who always came to buy French rolls. "You taught me that family isn't just blood. It's choice, it's love, it's being present in difficult times." At that moment, Lily ran to them, carrying a still warm French roll. "Look, Uncle Teddy, just like that day." Theodore smiled, remembering the stolen bread that had changed their lives. "Just like it, sweetie. But now you don't need to steal anymore. You can take as many as you want." "I don't want to anymore," she replied, breaking the bread into 3 pieces and distributing them among them. "It's tastier when we share." And so, in that bustling bakery in Chicago, 3 unlikely people formed a family. Not by blood or by appearances, but by choice. A family built on the strongest foundations that exist: truth, forgiveness, and unconditional love. The aroma of fresh bread still hung in the air, but now it brought with it not only the promise of food, but of a new beginning. And on the wall, a 6-year-old girl's drawing reminded everyone that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the most unlikely places, just as true love can be born from a simple piece of stolen bread.